Hi, my name is Joy Axelson, and I work with the online SBS. Today we're going to be looking at 2nd and 3rd John. We're going to be looking at the big picture and historical background in this lecture. Truth and love are two of the important themes in all of John's writings and two important themes of Christianity. John was very concerned that believers would show love and walk in the truth of what they believe. 1st and 2nd and 3rd John, the author deals with how the believers should show love to each other and yet protect the truth from those who are teaching false doctrine or not living in love and truth. One aspect of how the original readers should do this relates to whom they should show hospitality to and whom they should not. So to help us understand this more, we're going to look at some historical background. And there are three main points that I want to talk about. The first one, in the 1st century, there was a well-made road network which was developed so that travel was more convenient and safer. And the spread of the gospel all over, and helped with the spread of the gospel all over the Roman Empire. Paul and many of his co-workers traveled to different churches to encourage them. They were shown hospitality by the local home churches. For an example of this, we see this when Paul is in Caesarea, and he was staying in the house of Philippi, the evangelist. That's in Acts 21, verse 8. So it became normal that traveling Christians would stay in local churches, house churches, and they were shown hospitality with them. Village hotels were not very common in the Roman Empire, and when they were dirty, and they had fleas, and the owners of these hotels were not very honest. So it was not really a safe place for Christian traveling missionaries to stay at. So they really relied on the local church to provide housing and food and even financial support. But it seemed like this Christian hospitality was being abused in 2nd John by some false teachers. While in 3rd John, we see that there are believers who are accepting and showing hospitalities to these traveling missionaries. But even in 3rd John, there's one guy who refuses to show hospitality. Another point, second point, is in the 1st century, there are many traveling teachers and philosophers who traveled throughout the Roman Empire to spread their wisdom and their knowledge, and they received money for their knowledge. And the more money they got, the better they thought, and other people thought their knowledge was. They also carried letters of recommendation to show how great and famous they were. So their motivation was mostly for greed and for fame. Because of this, the 1st century churches had to be wise in knowing who to show hospitality to, because some of the traveling philosophers or teachers claimed to be Christians, but they really weren't, like we see in 2nd John. Some were true Christian missionary traveling teachers, which we see in 3rd John. Let's look at John 2, verse 10. 2 John 2:10 says, "If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, the true teaching of the gospel, do not receive him into your house or give him any greeting." And then, so that's about the false teachers, those who claim to be Christian but are not. And then in 3 John 5-8, it says, "Beloved, it is a faithful thing you do in all your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are, who testify to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God. For they have gone out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore we ought to support people like this, that we may be fellow workers for the truth." So in 3rd John, we have an example of true Christian missionaries who are strangers to those in this church, but this church shows them hospitality. So, but we also see in 3rd John an example of how John the Apostle recommends Demetrius, who might have taken 3rd John, this letter, to Gaius. So 3rd John is sort of like a letter of recommendation for Demetrius. A third point I want to bring out is that the churches of the area of Asia Minor and Ephesus were being influenced by pre-Gnostic beliefs and false teachers. Gnosticism did not really develop until the 2nd century, but there were these ideas that existed in the 1st century. We see this influence in the Gospel of John and also in 1st John, and it influences also 2nd John. I just want to give you a short summary about Gnosticism. Gnosticism included the Greek dualistic thinking, where they thought that the world and everything physical in the world was evil, while everything spiritual was good and pure. So they had this idea that humans, only a few select humans who had what they called a divine spark within them, that they had to free their spirits from this evil physical world. And how they did this was through special knowledge that they gained from different gods or different angels. So this helped, through this knowledge, they were able to free their spirits from this evil world. Gnostic thought about Jesus developed into 2 branches. One is called Gnosticism, which they said that Jesus was as God, could not be a physical man. He only was a spirit that appeared on the earth. So he was like a ghost. So he wasn't a real physical man, but he appeared like a ghost. The second thought was Cerinthianism, where Jesus, so there's a difference in this belief between Jesus and Christ. So they saw Jesus was the physical man that was born. And then when he was baptized in the River Jordan, the spiritual Christ came upon him. And then at his death, or right before his death, the spiritual Christ flew off of Jesus and the physical Jesus died. So anyway, the main point is Gnosticism denied the incarnation of Christ Jesus. So most likely, maybe John the Apostle was dealing with the form of Cerinthianism in 2nd John. The results of Gnosticism developed or created in Christians different aspects. One is asceticism, where they would oppress the physical body to be more spiritual. For example, they would fast or not get married, those kind of things. Anything physical was seen as bad. Another form that developed opposite of that is licentiousness. So they thought that whatever a person did in their physical body would not affect their spirit. So they can do any kind of sin in their body and their spirit was pure enough so it didn't matter. Another effect of Gnosticism was a lack of love. Because if you think about it, only a few had this divine spark. So it created a lack of love and pride, and kind of people thought they were more special because they had this special knowledge and other people didn't. And it also created a sense of insecurity among believers where they were doubting their salvation. So in 2nd and 3rd John, the author shows the original reader of both books how to evaluate and how to deal with traveling teachers, missionaries, including both real Christian teachers and false teachers. It's interesting to note that there actually exists from the 2nd century a writing called The Teaching of the 12 Apostles. It's not in the canon, but it gives guidelines of how to evaluate and to support traveling preachers and missionaries. So let's look at the big picture of 2nd and 3rd John. In summary, the author is writing 2nd and 3rd John to show whom the churches are to welcome and whom they are not, and why. They are to accept those, number one, who are truly motivated out of love and serving Jesus. We see this especially in 3rd John, verse 6 and 7. And secondly, those who proclaim the true doctrine of Jesus. And we see this in 2 John, verse 7. So if these traveling believers faithfully proclaim the true gospel and are out ministering for the sake of Jesus and not for greed, that they should be accepted and helped onward in their next part of their journey. So, in conclusion, 2 John shows the church whom not to accept or to show hospitality to, the false teachers. Because in 2 John 10, they are teaching false teaching about the humanity of Christ. 3rd John, the author shows the church whom they must or should accept and show hospitality to, those who are faithful and true believers. They have the true doctrine and true motives. Thank you. That's the end of this lecture.